Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another webinar from the series of SharePoint webinars that we are running as part of educating our audience around SharePoint and what SharePoint can do. James, our senior Microsoft consultant, has joined us today as well as always. James, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you very much, Rohit.
So the idea today is to discuss and talk about third-party apps in SharePoint. As always, if you have any questions, please throw them into the Q&A channel and we will happily answer them for you. James will be doing a lot of hands-on session today as well, and it's all being recorded for you so that you can then play it and see it later on as well. So without further ado, James, I'll pass it over to you so that you can take us through the journey of what are third-party apps and how to implement them, how to get the best out of them in Microsoft World as well. So over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Rohit. I'm just checking you can see that.
Yeah.
Green, fantastic. Right, good morning, everyone. As Rohit said, I'm James McDowall. I'm the Senior Microsoft Consultant at Alberon. And we'll be looking at third-party integration, not just in SharePoint, but I am going to briefly touch on Microsoft Teams, Power Automate, and some of the core Office 365 apps as well. So as we covered in some previous webinars, this is our demonstration SharePoint site. And I'm just going to show you how to look at some of the out-of-the-box third-party applications that are available that can work in tandem with SharePoint, and also how you can add some extra ones in yourself quite simply. So as we've touched on before, SharePoint's not just a document management system with all your data on the left-hand side, as you can see in that menu there, but it also allows you to construct an interactive, dynamic workspace on this canvas, which allows you to collaborate and information share. If you put the site into edit mode, it allows you to construct your site and add sections and structure it, the layout, to whatever your specifications are. It also then gives you the option in each section to add in what's called web parts. Now there's a catalog built in, as you can see here. A lot of it allows you to reference other applications or information content that you've created around 365, and there's various different options. But there are also some third-party services built into here. So for example, YouTube, if you've got a corporate YouTube channel, you can embed that and have that directly available and visible in your SharePoint site. There's also Twitter as well. So if you've got a company Twitter account, this is quite useful for communications, marketing, media teams. You can have your Twitter account fully embedded into your SharePoint site so that you can very easily monitor your Twitter feed without having to leave SharePoint, which is really useful. And down the bottom, there are a whole host of advanced third-party applications which you can directly embed within your SharePoint site. As you can see a few of them there, so we've got Google Analytics, Salesforce, you can have RSS feeds, Trello and Jira, which a lot of project teams like using. And that just makes it really simple to have that those tools, those software applications available directly in SharePoint, so your staff are not having to go out and go into other tabs on their browser or open other applications, and you can have it all there in one place, which is really, really good. The next one I want to touch on is news. This is something we've actually discussed with an existing client of ours. One of the web parts is, as you can see here, is a news application, and it allows you to create news content and publish it so it's visible to your workforce. Now, this could be internal events, announcements, changes, stuff that you need to make your staff aware of. But when you go to add one, you've also got an additional option of news link. And what that does is it allows you to copy and paste in a link to an external news source that your staff or your teams may want to keep an eye on. It could be news published externally by an industry broadcast, or it could be, BBC News, depending. It really depends on what you're after. But that allows you to pull external news stories directly into your SharePoint site, so you can keep an eye on external information that may be pertinent to your team or your business. So that's a really, really useful feature.
So, James, I was thinking that if, I can keep this interactive for some of our,
Mhm.
audience as well. And yes, that can probably kind of give us a few questions for the
Mhm.
audience. So, you're saying that third-party news can be included in this. Is that RSS feed coming in from BBC and likes of those?
So you can have RSS feeds, as you saw in that web part catalog. RSS
Hmm.
was an option, but
Hmm.
no, this can actually pull in from news sites, websites. So, for example, say BBC News, off the top of my
Hmm.
head, you can copy and paste the link to the BBC News website, and that will pull the latest BBC headlines straight into your thing. I know the client that we've been discussing this with, they have an industry group that actually publishes news about that sector, and it's something
Right.
they do like to keep abreast of. So we're helping them to
Fair
pull
enough.
that in.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it's a feature that not many people are aware of, but it's really useful. I mean, a lot of people like publishing their own content, but
Mm,
sometimes, depending on what sector you're in, it's important to keep an eye on what's going on outside of your
exactly.
business as well.
Exactly.
So yeah, very good feature, and very simple to set up, as you can see. So um, um, if the if you have a third-party application that isn't included in that catalog, there is an option to go and search for it. We have what's called the SharePoint store, which is a whole catalog of third-party applications. And if you select new in your SharePoint site, you'll see at the bottom the option is app, and that will take you through to a SharePoint store, and you can search for that software to see if it's available. If it is, you can then choose to add it as a web part and it'll be added into the catalog, or you can just embed it directly in your site. New third-party applications being added all the time, so it's always worth checking that SharePoint store or getting your site owners to check it periodically just to see what's been added. You can search for individual apps, so you can search by category as well. So it's well worth checking out that catalog just to see if any third-party software you're using is included and available to embed.
What sort of third-party apps are available, James? If we go to that, if we go to that library, what sort
So
of
if we
apps are we expecting?
so if we have a quick look here, so when it brings you through, there's one I'm going to touch on in a minute that I've already added, as you can see, DocuSign. But you can search for the if you go into the SharePoint store, it'll actually take you through, and then you can filter by how you want it to appear in SharePoint solution, and then you can see all these categories here, and there's a whole catalog of third-party apps that your organization may or may not be using, and then obviously you can break it down into category. Very quick to add in. Some of them do come at a cost, but if you're using that software, then I can make the assumption that you're already paying for that service, so there won't be an additional cost. But there's no cost to actually add it in if it's a service you're using. Interestingly as well, you can also create your own applications within Power Apps, and they can become visible in SharePoint as well. So if your internal teams are creating their own applications, which is something we're going to cover on a future webinar, you can add those in as well. So they're technically not third party, but will be custom apps for your business.
Okay. But they have to be developed in the SharePoint environment then. Would that be fair?
No, they're developed in the Power Apps environment, but because Power Apps is part of 365, the content's about accessible for. It's one of the beauties of 365 is that content can be shared around. There is 3 more apps that I'm going to touch on briefly, and these are I'm going to use these because these are ones I've actually used myself in SharePoint. It is possible to directly integrate certain third-party software. Not through adding it as a web part through the SharePoint store, but actually fully embedded it into your document libraries. And these are really, I found these really useful myself when I used them. There are more, but I will just briefly touch on these 3. So the first one is SurveyMonkey. SurveyMonkey is a popular survey tool used by a lot of organizations. And if it is something you use, you can integrate it with SharePoint. So from any of your document libraries, when you select new to create some new content, obviously you can see all the Office applications there. SurveyMonkey will actually appear in this list, and you can initiate new surveys direct from SharePoint, which saves a lot of time, so you don't have to go back out to the SurveyMonkey portal. The second one I'm going to talk about is Adobe Document Cloud. Adobe is obviously a really popular PDF editor, creator, viewer for a lot of organizations. And if it's something you do use, Adobe Acrobat or Adobe Pro, you can actually, through the Adobe website, get it fully integrated into your SharePoint environment. And that will do two things. Firstly, Adobe will then replace the Microsoft PDF viewer as the default PDF viewer editor. And you'll know that's happened because all the PDF, don't have any in here, but all the PDF icons will change to the Adobe logo. So you'll know that's happened. The second thing it does is it makes all the Adobe options available to you directly in your SharePoint environment. So if you select a PDF and go up to the document options, Adobe will appear there and you'll be able to do all the functions like split and merge, fill and sign, create. It also gives you the option to very quickly convert Office documents to PDF and vice versa directly in your SharePoint sites. So if Adobe is something that your organization use, I highly recommend that because you can then do everything in SharePoint. It makes it a one-stop shop. Although I'll caveat that with once you've integrated it to SharePoint, in the Adobe Desktop app, you can actually select your SharePoint sites and your OneDrive as preferred locations. And it means if you do use the Adobe Desktop app, you can actually still access all the PDFs within OneDrive and SharePoint from there. So it gives you a couple of options, but it's something I've used, found it very useful. The third one, last one I'm going to touch on is DocuSign, as you would have seen earlier when we were in the SharePoint store. If you do have DocuSign licenses, it's a very common electronic signature application. You can add that in yourself from the SharePoint store, and it will add to your SharePoint site. And then if you want to sign a document, for example, if I wanted to sign that one or send it for signatures, I've actually embedded it in this, so it makes a better demo. Once you've selected the document, select the options, and as you can see, DocuSign is there, and all the DocuSign options are available, so you can initiate signatures direct from SharePoint. Once this document has been completed, it's been signed by everyone that needs to sign it, DocuSign will actually automatically create a folder in that document library called DocuSign Documents, and it will save final copies of that signed document directly back into your SharePoint document libraries. So this is another useful feature if DocuSign is something you use. Fully integrating it into your SharePoint document library saves a lot of time, and it saves you having to keep going back out into the DocuSign portal and vice versa. So I've used all three of those in my previous company. We found it was such a time saver. It just made everything more efficient and effective, and you were keeping everything in one place. So that's the SharePoint integration. There's an awful lot more. So obviously, if anyone's got any questions, please get in touch with us and we can go into specifics and that in more detail. So yeah, as I said, Adobe Sign and DocuSign are actually automatically available within Microsoft Teams. And if those are products that you use, you will get Teams notifications and you'll get a full audit trail of every document you've sent for a signature or every document that's been sent to you for a signature. And you can see it within Microsoft Teams and it will flash up notifications. Quite usefully with DocuSign in particular, if you've sent a document out that requires multiple signatures, you will actually get a notification at each stage of that process in Teams so that you can see where the document is at. So if you're a heavy Teams user, that's really, really useful because it means you can carry on working in Teams but still know what's going on with some of your other stuff. As you can also see from the left-hand side, there is an apps option in the menu. And if you select that, similar to the SharePoint store, there's a whole range of either Microsoft apps or third-party apps that you can add to your Teams environment. These then become available in your Teams channels or your Teams conversations. For example, if you embedded YouTube, it'll appear as an option in the bottom where you can type your chat message in. So you can very quickly open it up, search for a corporate YouTube video and click send, and that will appear in the channel. And like I said, a lot of these will third-party apps will send you Teams notifications, so you're always kept aware of changes. There's too many to go through. As you can see, it's a huge catalog, and just like the SharePoint store, you can search by features or by categories, and they're very quick to add in. So I would encourage you, particularly if you use Teams a lot, to go and have a look at that. Think about some of the third-party applications that you may use and see if it's available and add it in. And it makes Teams a one-stop shop as well. So whichever the core 365 apps you're in, whether it's Teams or SharePoint, you can very quickly access information or data from other applications that you may use.
But James, the apps in Teams and apps in SharePoint, are they same? Are they different?
Well, they can be the same applications, but they need to be installed in both. So if you installed one in SharePoint, for example, it wouldn't automatically be in your Teams environment. And there are slight differences. There seems to actually be more common ones available in Microsoft Teams. For whatever reason, I'm not entirely sure, but
then tell me, if they are different from administrators' perspective, in quite a number of our clients' place where they are installing it for all of their organization. Is it something once that you've installed it for your organization, a sysadmin has installed it for the organization, it's available to everybody?
Yeah. So if you I'll touch on the difference between, we are going to have a Teams webinar coming up, but I'll touch on it quickly. So Teams channels are directly linked to a SharePoint site. So that's provided to a group of people, maybe a finance team or a HR team or whatever it is. Now, if you as a Teams owner add an application, third-party application into that channel, it becomes available to everyone who's got access to that channel. Within chats, because they could be private, one-to-one, or one-to-many, you would have to add them in yourself. But in the actual Teams channels, you can, if you add it in, it will become available to everybody for collaboration. Yeah, so as you can see, there's a huge range of apps. Some of them are Microsoft, some of them aren't, but there's some very common ones. TeamViewer, Adobe and DocuSign are available. Like I said, social media feeds and stuff, and they are adding more all the time. So it really depends. Obviously, we would work with you on how you're using 365. If you spend the majority of your time in Teams, then obviously you can set stuff up in there. If you're in SharePoint a lot, obviously we can help you with that. But it's quite useful to get them added in. Just makes it easier. One thing I didn't mention with SharePoint, and I will just quickly say, if your third-party app or software is not available, but if it's cloud-based, you can still create a link to it in SharePoint. So for example, in my last role, we had 3 or 4 cloud-based software solutions that we used that weren't actually available directly into SharePoint. So we created a button panel basically with a selection of buttons. So it just allowed staff to quickly access other sources, because you can link out to external applications or websites. So even if it's not included, it doesn't mean to say you can't.
Yeah, definitely. That's something.
Make your staff's life easier.
And fair to say, the developers at Alberon can actually develop some of the integrations as well, if need be.
Absolutely, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I think it's a plethora of options which are available from the third-party apps as soon as you integrate them into Teams and/or SharePoint. So quite a lot of power which is available here. And I think moving on to Power Automate now. Yeah,
it's just so you can see that. Fantastic. So Power Automate. Now we are going to cover Power Apps on a upcoming webinar. I won't go into it in a huge amount of detail here because this is quite a complex thing to describe. But basically, it's an application that allows you to automate some of your business workflows and processes. With low code, it's a really, really powerful and useful application. But it doesn't just allow you to automate stuff within your 365 environment. As you can see here from connectors, when it loads up, you can build workflows that include a whole range of third-party applications as well. So within connectors, you've got a huge catalog. As you can see, we've got Twitter, Adobe's available, GitHub. There's a huge range of third-party applications alongside the Microsoft 365 ones. So it allows you to build smart automation that actually uses some of your third-party apps as well. I've used this with DocuSign to automatically trigger signatures based on certain activities. And there's a huge range. I mean, we will cover this in more detail in the Power Apps webinar, but it just shows you that using some of the smart features of 365 doesn't mean to say it's done in isolation. You can include additional software that your organization might use to build up these flows. And you also, the Approvals app, you've got an audit history there, so you can access that direct from Power Automate as well. Some of you may be aware of this anyway, because this feature's been available for quite some time, even prior to 365. But within the core Office applications, so Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, you've got an option which is called Add-ins, which is usually that icon there. And that allows you to add certain third-party applications into those core Office products so that you can actually interact with them directly from that. I've added a few here to Outlook just for your information, so you can see I've got Dropbox, Adobe Sign, DocuSign. There's a huge range more. And what that allows you to do is you don't have to leave the application you're in to go and do another activity. You can actually do it direct from there. So you could automatically send an email attachment for signatures, or within Word, you could automatically have it sent to Dropbox, or for example. So it's worth having a good think about what your organization uses, what might be useful to you, and integrating all this in 365 makes 365, particularly SharePoint and Teams and Office, it just improves efficiency, it saves time, it just allows you to do multiple activities from the same place. And I can speak from personal experience that it really is a game changer in some respects, depending on what applications you use. So yeah. So
it does look like, a game changer when everything comes together. Thank you, James. That was fantastic presentation. That was fantastic demonstration of all the capabilities as well. Thank you all for joining us. I hope this was useful. James, our in-house expert, is available for a conversation with you for your specific needs as well. So if you have any questions, please drop them at hello@alberon.co.uk. We will see you at the next webinar again. Until then, thank you and goodbye.